My favorite word in any language has to be art, Kunst, Arte. It's what I do, whether making my personal work in my studio or if I'm designing exhibitions for venues like the Charles Alice. Right now, Threshold is on, and it's a show that I have been working on for about 9 months now. We're just getting to some of the juicier parts of the programming, so it's very exciting. I also create public art with teams of people that I employ from time to time. Over the last 15 months, I've curated and organized 5 exhibitions nationally and locally. So the focus of my talk today, when I'm thinking about language, is going to be kind of in the art context, but also thinking about exhibitions. So I'd like to start by saying that I think that we can all agree that language goes beyond words, right? All right. Think of the last hug you gave, or the last time you were creeped out in the dark. That's pretty much it. You know, you sense it, you know it. In my world, I use materials to speak to my audiences. I draw from architectural language of the exhibition spaces that, in order to further the content of the shows that I curate, I have to, because I believe that they speak so loudly. So I'm going to start my talk at the beginning, in New Mexico, where my parents raised me, leaving behind the icy winters of Wisconsin for 300 days of sunshine a year and mild weather. I have no idea what they were thinking. So in the early 80s, the Albuquerque Public Service Department had started a new campaign as an effort to help prevent drownings in the ditches that were happening. These bumper stickers were plastered everywhere. Flash floods are a big problem in arid climates. But what is a ditch witch, and how is this image supposed to be compelling? Well, Senor Sueños, the traveling storyteller, came to our class one day and told us the story of La Llorona. In this traditional southwestern tale, a young woman falls in love with a young nobleman. They have children, but they never marry. When his parents find out, they demand he break it off. He marries someone of his own status. He says no. But as time goes on, he eventually gives in, breaking off his relationship with Maria. He gets engaged to another woman, and Maria goes to the wedding wearing a black veil. After the ceremony filled with anger and rage, she returns home and drowns their children and then herself in a river. When she's met by God in heaven, he asks where her children are, and she tells him that what she's done, and God tells her to go back, that she must find her children before she can return. Maria is then trapped between the living world and the spirit world for all eternity, wandering along rivers, canals, and apparently urban Albuquerque ditches, searching in vain for her drowned children. She weeps as she searches and is known as La Llorona, the weeping woman, a phantom who pulls children into waterways and drowns them in search for her own. There's a phantom waiting to drown me? After hearing this story, I was convinced that La Llorona was real. The whole city was in on it, after all. And when my sister and I would walk past the ditches in our subdivision, a cemetery chill would rise from the paved arroyo. The cement spoke the same language as headstones, but miles long and designed to sweep me away. My fear of flash floods paled in comparison to the mortal threat of La Llorona. So between the campaign and Mr. Sueños' story, I can confirm that Bob Evans' kindergarten class was totally freaked out. Very effective, Albuquerque Public Service Department, very effective indeed. To this day, I am wary of ditches, and part of it is still her. My point being that the effect of language at times goes beyond words. So many of my family members are bilingual, and most of the streets and almost all of the towns in New Mexico have Spanish names. Growing up in the confluence of two languages taught me that while it's possible to translate words, nuances are sometimes lost or changed in the shuffle. The pronunciation of words expands upon their meaning. Just think about how it feels to say them. A rhyme changes, and then that shifts how we joke, but it also shifts the way that we link together ideas. Language in Spanish is la lengua, which also means the tongue, an organ used to eat, taste, and sometimes touch the world around us. I really enjoy the combination of these two meanings in Spanish as it places oral tradition within the mouth itself. Some would argue that the tongue is kind of grotesque, covered in a thin layer of mucus, cultivating bacteria, the culprit behind morning breath or coffee breath. Yeah. Yet it gives us the ability to shape words, sound, and deliver really good kisses. When an artistic intervention takes place on the body, a myriad of possibilities, conversations, and histories open at once. In jeweler and performance artist Laurel Kallman's video, Hardware Tongue Gilding, the natural movement of the artist's tongue, while covered in gold leaf, subtly shifts and moves through the duration of the recording. This image is a still from that video. The pulse of her heart is visible through the thin sheet of gold. The metal begins to move as if it were liquid, as the living body animates a non-living material. Eventually, saliva begins to drip from her mouth as the pose and the placement of the gold on her tongue stir the digestive process. There are several intersections taking place here at once. The world of traditional craft collides with performance. Ornamentation and body fetish are drawn into question. Seduction courts the fabulously grotesque, and an uncanny awareness of the foreignness of our own bodies is commemorated in precious metal. In artist April Dauscha's performance, Custody of the Tongue, Veiling, we watch the artist slip a lace cover over her tongue. This is a still taken from moments after the lace has been applied and her hands have been lowered from her face. She too begins salivating about halfway through the clip, but the effect is different. Having watched the placement of the material on the body, we're encouraged to consider this action to begin with a kind of dressing of the organ. Lace, like gold, speaks to class values, but it also directly engages notions of gender, specifically femininity. The material implications include wedding veils, domestic coverings, and family heirlooms. Dauscha's tongue, in contrast to Kallman's, remains outstretched, a physical position that implies more effort, if not strain, to hold. The concept of veiling, being secretive or hiding, for me is implicit in this work, but in a way that evokes tradition and beauty in a profoundly unsettling way. Both of these performances demonstrate that language goes beyond words. It's possible to draw meanings from these performances, which can begin personal connections and then lead to broader understandings. A visual language replaces words, drawing from the psychological qualities of material and physical performance to communicate about contemporary life in intricate and complex ways. So when I curate exhibitions, language is present in the materials, and it's the proximity of how I place the artwork in proximity to each other and the type of space the exhibition is shown in. The written text and the catalog accompany it, but those, for me, end up being kind of secondary. I am, of course, an artist first. Engendered is an exhibition that explores notions of sexuality, identity, and gender through the work of 20 artists. These images show how it was displayed at the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design last spring. Thank you, Richard Beauchamp. These images are his. When displaying artwork, there are 100 ways to make excellent pieces look terrible. The challenge being that all exhibition spaces are imperfect. As a curator, I'm responsible for displaying and creating visual conversations between pieces like you see here. I enjoy this challenge, and working with living artists means that if something doesn't look right, I'm going to hear about it. So I do my best to just avoid those sorts of conversations. In the center of this image, you'll see a text panel. So typically when you read panels like this, you read the information of the artwork. There's the artist, the title, materials, dimensions, year, and a brief statement that the curator of the museum is stating about the piece. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? You've seen these before. Do you read them? Really? Yeah. Nice. I'm impressed. I tend to be a person who blows past them, and then when things really catch my eye, I might stop and commit. But for those of you who really, wow, this is great. I feel like the job is worth it. Yeah. So let's see. So what I prefer to do, and what's a little different about my shows, is that I use the artist voice. So in Engendered, there were statements written by, it was the artist's statement, and then the artist bio. If I receive a statement that needs a little work, the words are a little wonky, I'll send them edits. And for the most part, people are really thankful for that. I mean, everybody loves feedback. And if they need a particular word count is needed, I ask for help with achieving it. So why? Part of it has to do with my selection process, which is more intuitive than cerebral. So I see creating an exhibition as a way of bringing together a community of artists who are already involved through the type of work they make, whether they know each other or not. I'm there to help facilitate bringing their message forward. And, artists are interesting, so I find their authentic voice to be more compelling than, I don't know. I think it all went back to, I took an art history class where I was able to read the official documents, like manifestos, and it wasn't like that regurgitated textbook that you could open. And ever since then, I've had a hard time going back. So these are things I've been thinking about. So moving on, we have condoms. I hear they can be better than coffee. 5 months after the story of my latex embroidery piece went viral, I received an email from a warehouse distribution company in South Dakota, and they had a client who was no longer paying their bills, and inside of this climate-controlled warehouse were 1.2 million or 10.5 tons of condoms that were about 6 weeks from expiring. So I reached out to every sexual advocacy group that I knew to see if we could get these to the people, because that's the way that they would be the most effective. Unfortunately, pretty much across the board, everybody has a 90-day from expiration date, so we weren't able to use them that way. So then it was like landfill, and then I thought, when are you offered a truckload of anything? It was like, I really don't need to be the Tara Donovan of rubbers. It's bad enough that my last name's Johnson. I do have a whole other career, right? I work in a lot of materials. So, of course, I accepted it. And this is one of the 26 pallets that came off of a full semi. Yeah. Many thanks to Mark Tepper, who has been graciously housing the shipment for free, while preservatif, which is the word for condom in French, all of the condoms are French, preservatif has been built, and as it is now traveling nationally. With this, what I decided was that this was a great opportunity to broaden the conversation about the possibilities of latex in a really positive and kind of broadening way. And in order to do that, I needed the minds of other artists to handle the material and bring new voices to it. So I asked 35 artists the first time around to submit proposals, and out of that, my friend Kim Heineman and I selected 19. The condoms were shipped around the United States. And this is an example of a piece of art that came from the show. This is a brooch. It's made out of the wrapper's resin and sterling silver. It's about 6 inches in diameter. Dancing mattresses that seem to be attached in one way or another with epoxy-coated condoms. And the show started here. We opened on World AIDS Day in, it was December 1st, 2014 in Milwaukee, and then it traveled to Memphis, Tennessee, opening on National HIV Testing Day and that was in the middle of the summer of 2015. I have my sights set on LA next, and we are adding more artists. What I would like to do is see this show travel and just work through the entire shipment, bringing more voices and more thoughts about how incredible this material is. Yes, so we have another component within with Preservatif is that we work with every community that we go to, and we have unwrap parties. So sexual advocacy groups come on board, they bring their people, we can get a bunch of volunteers, and we sit there and race and slice through as many of those, but doing things you should never do to a condom. It's like, it's like scissors up the side. And it was really fun is watching young people get involved and start laughing, opening up, talking about their sex lives or any sort of taboo that's going on. And it's such a community building exhibition. It's very different than, I would say all of the exhibitions I put together are quite different from each other, including the one that's happening here right now. So while the show was opening in Memphis, the press caught wind of the fact that MAM had acquired Eggs Benedict. So when I returned home, I was having conversations with Brady Roberts about the design of how they were going to be displaying my work. And he wanted to include a lot of language. And being a minimalist, I was like, you're gonna stick Post-its on the wall? Like, really, do we have to? Like, how big do those didactic panels need to be? Like, you need my statement, the museum's statement, the church's statement, like, how far do we need to go? Can people just experience the work? I was upset. Like, I remember leaving and being like, I don't know. But it took me weeks to get down there too. And when I finally showed up, this is what one of the wall didactics looked like. I was blown away by how well it worked. And if anything, I absolutely loved the sorts of comments and the interactions that were going on that wall. Ideally, I'd love to scan in all of those and make a coffee table book out of it because it's so interesting. This is the part of the wall where they were switching out letters for hope, nope, dope, pope. It was, you go in every day and it would be just different. People wouldn't, there wasn't anything malicious. People weren't taking it down, but they would just kind of cover up comments they didn't like or disagreed with. This just gets goofy. So even though art goes beyond language, it's really a beautiful thing in a situation like this to see the way that language works with art. All right, well, wow, I'm doing good on time. Okay, so lastly, here we are, Threshold. Threshold, well, I've been working on this exhibition for several months. It went up in the beginning of November, and after much negotiation, the Charles Alice allowed me to move parts of their permanent collection, which they've never allowed before. This was an interesting, and it took a while. I mean, I showed up with these great ideas, right? Listen to me. I showed up, with some ideas about what I want to do, and they were like, who are you? You want to do what with our what? And it took a while to build the trust, but I'm happy to say that it was built. And we have been able to kind of push deeper and past all sorts of boundaries that this museum has had before. And its desire to historically preserve what was gifted by the Alice family, which is understandable. So I will tempt you with this image. All of you have free admission to the show, so I encourage you to take some time and wander around. The best time to see this show is alone on a Wednesday afternoon when nobody's around. If you can schedule an hour or two, it is an experiential exhibition, which means that each room will speak to you if you spend time with it. So, thank you very much. And thank you to everybody who lent me photos so that I could do this talk.